As Aaron Morgenstern once said, all empires fall eventually. It is the way of things. She, of course, was referring to the decline and eventual fall of the Southeastern Conference. I'm Chris Johnston. This is the Flatland Sports Podcast.
And now, what is this?
I know you're gonna dig this. This is the Flatland Sports Podcast.
Where do you come from? Lubbock, Texas?
Lubbock, Texas.
A place called Lubbock.
I wonder if they think I'm so gorgeous back in Lubbock.
What do you care about Lubbock? You're big time now.
I'm just a little homesick, that's all.
Is that what you want, Larry, to spend the night in Lubbock, Texas at a day's inn with a $15 voucher from Cinnabon?
Lubbock? No, it's near Lubbock.
What's it like there?
It's flat, real flat. You stand on a coffee can, you can see Colorado.
Happy Friday. This is the Flatland Sports Podcast, free and available worldwide on YouTube and Spotify. I am Christopher Johnston. In 2022, after the Big Ten destroyed the Pac-12 and the SEC appeared to be in the driver's seat to destroy college football as a whole, I predicted two things. One, the Big Ten deal was just going to be an absolute bust, namely for its TV partners, who I think overpaid. Fox, CBS, and NBC, who went all in on what is going to be a very outdated mode of communication. And the second thing I predicted was that eventually the SEC, with all of its power, with all of its momentum, was going to fly too close to the sun and its wings were going to melt. I'll tell you why the SEC is starting to crack. Also preview Texas Tech's upcoming game against the former Southwestern Conference rival Houston. Big 12 power rankings coming up, all that and more. But first, Red Raiders in action. Since the last show, we took a little bit of a break. But since the last show, Texas Tech soccer started Big 12 play 2-0-1, had a 1-0 win at Baylor, 1-1 tie versus Houston, and a 2-0 win at Iowa State. Texas Tech now tied with Colorado for second place, exactly one game behind TCU as I record this. TCU in the sole first place spot for the Big 12 in the soccer standings. And of course, Texas Tech football moved up to number 11 in the AP poll. This year's AP poll has just been an absolute mess. By far the worst in recent memory, from things like a 2-2 Notre Dame, at one point 0-2 Notre Dame team still being ranked. Last week you had, and I'm not one to kick up for the SEC here, but you saw a number 13 ranked Ole Miss team jumped to number 4 after beating number 4 LSU, who dropped to 13. So either Ole Miss is such a bad team that LSU dropped 9 spots, and if that's the case, why is Ole Miss number 4? Or LSU is such a good team that it elevated Ole Miss all the way to number 4, in which case, why is LSU down to number 13? Why do they drop 9 spots? And then on top of all that, the Big 12 painfully underranked with no teams cracking the top 10, TCU dropping out after a close loss to a ranked Arizona State team. Just an absolute mess. Despite all of that, though, Texas Tech one spot away from cracking the top 10. The respect on the national level is coming to Lubbock. Texas Tech this week travels to the Bayou City to take on the former Southwestern Conference rival Houston Cougars. That is a 6 p.m. kickoff on ESPN. You can also listen to it on the Texas Tech Sports Network. Get the dulcet tones of Brian Jensen, John Harris, and Chris Level. Texas Tech, a 12.5 point favorite. What do we need to know about the Houston Cougars? Well, Houston comes into this matchup. I would imagine they feel a little bit disrespected. They are undefeated 4-0, not ranked, not really on anybody's radar. They did just come off of a 27-24 win over Oregon State. Of course, a team that Texas Tech demolished 45-14 just earlier this season. Houston, at first glance, looks to be a much improved team in year 2 under Willie Fritz. Last year, Houston was 4-8, looking better this year. I predicted at the start of the season and still see 8-4 for the Cougars this year. Now, the main storyline, Sheil Woods' return to Houston, was the Cougars' defensive coordinator last year until, as according to Willie Fritz, Texas Tech just offered way more money than Houston could counter with. Wood took that Houston defense that, when he came in the year prior, was ranked 108th in total defense in 2023, and in one season bumped them up to a top 40 defense in 2024. According to Joey McGuire and according to Willie Fritz, he's considered one of the best in-game coordinators in the country in terms of his ability to make corrections, make adjustments, and play call during the game. The absolute master of doing more with less. And now at Texas Tech, Sheil Wood gets to do more with a lot more with the roster that Texas Tech put together over in the offseason. Texas Tech coming off of a huge win on the road. Well, Texas Tech coming off of a bye week. Before that, a huge win on the road against number 16 Utah. Tech, of course, climbing to number 11 in the AP poll. This is the highest ranking for the Red Raiders since 2013 when Texas Tech was ranked number 10 in week 8. Players to watch, Houston. First of all, quarterback Connor Wegman. He's the junior from Cypress, Texas. He's got 839 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's got 1 interception. That was against Oregon State last week. 61% completion rate. He is a dual threat quarterback, very mobile, and has a good arm. Great at making deep passes if you give him a chance. Another player to watch, Dean Connors, the running back, the senior from Hawaii. He's got 324 yards on 67 carries, 3 touchdowns. Very, very fast in the open field. Very hard to tackle in the open field as well. And on the other side of the ball, Corey Platt Jr., the linebacker, he's a sophomore from Little Rock, Arkansas, leads the Cougars in sacks and will be a challenge for the Red Raider offensive line. On Texas Tech side, Baron Morton, definitely want to take a look and take an interest in him this week as he left the last game early in the first half with what they said was a head and neck injury. It was neck soreness is what he was dealing with after the game. In the moment, it looked like he was, at least to an extent, concussed. Another player to take a look at, Cam Dickey, had a great game against Utah with 2 touchdowns, improving each week in the pass protection game, something that Texas Tech really took a hit on with the loss of Quentin Joyner, among many other things that Quentin Joyner was going to bring to the table. Also on the defensive side of the ball, David Bailey leads the teams in sacks at 3.5 and is going to be playing what is a very soft offensive line for Houston. Time now, we'll go to the keys to the game. Key number 1, defensive wins in the trenches. The Houston offensive line is soft, stop the run, put pressure on Weigman, and force him to make mistakes. Key number 2 is just Baron Morton playing like Baron Morton. Start strong, start fast, pick up right where you left off before the injury. Don't let there be a dip. Don't give Houston a chance to punch you in the face early. And key number 3, run the dang ball. Establish the run early, run it often, and run it down their throats. The Houston defense is soft on the exterior. If you force Houston to sell out on the run and get Morton one-on-one matchups deep, you're going to just have your way with the Cougars on Saturday. Final thoughts, Houston is improved, maybe a contender in a couple years. I don't think they're there yet, and the talent gap between both of these teams in the trenches may be too wide for the Cougars to overcome. My score prediction, Texas Tech 35, Houston 14. The almighty, all-powerful Southeastern Conference is beginning to crack. Actually, it's been cracking since last summer when coaches spoke out of term against the proposed 16-team playoff. Greg Sankey, along with the Big Ten, were pushing for a 4+4+2+2 model. So basically, 4 automatic qualifiers from the SEC, 4 automatic qualifiers from the Big Ten, 2 from the Big 12, 2 from the ACC, and then 1 group of 5 and Notre Dame or an at-large. Coaches, on the other hand, disagreed and went to the media, specifically during SEC media days, and put out there that they were not a fan of that model. Specifically, they wanted 5+11, which is 5 conference champions and then 11 at-large. Now, that doesn't seem like too much from the outside looking in. You know, conferences, coaches, administrators, they must have disagreements all the time, right? Why is that a big deal? Well, I'll tell you why. Historically, the SEC is always in lockstep. Disagreements and dissent happen, of course, they stay internal. You don't ever hear about them. For example, it was clear A&M was wholly against Texas and OU joining the SEC back in 2021. However, the public statement, the public voice, was that the vote was unanimous. A&M was happy to bring them along. However, the entire thing was almost completely derailed because of A&M and moves they were making in the background. But even in trying to sabotage the whole thing, A&M didn't dare make a public statement. A&M didn't dare go against the conference. So when you see coaches going out of their way to talk to the media and push for something that is in direct contrast to what the official narrative is supposed to be, it means something is afoot. It means these coaches don't feel like they're being listened to. It means usual conflict resolution channels within the SEC are not working and did not work, and coaches decided to go public to sway the court of public opinion. Which brings us to our latest chapter in the playoff saga. In an article last week, Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports outlined the annual fall college football playoff meeting. I'll read a little bit of the article. On Wednesday here, the 10 FBS conference commissioners and Notre Dame's athletic director gathered for their annual fall college football playoff meeting. Plenty was on the agenda: a discussion over the playoffs governance structure, more work on long-form agreements, and a review of the organizational study from the consulting firm Korn Ferry. What was missing? A real serious discussion over the future of the playoff format. Which that alone isn't breaking news, because the playoff format struggle has been incredibly slow moving, particularly in this round. You know, it took college football as a whole, a sport that's over 150 years old. It took them about 120 just to get number 1 and number 2 to play each other for a national championship. Took an additional 20 years after that to get a 4-team playoff in place. And now, as we have a 12-team playoff, trying to move from 12 to anything more substantial than that has been like watching paint dry. It's the next part, though, that gets interesting. So continuing, perhaps that's because a new strategy is emerging. Power Conference commissioners are exploring a new working group made up of their own athletic directors, 2 to 3 from each of the Big Ten, SEC, ACC, and Big 12, to consider a variety of CFP formats. Those with knowledge of the plans tell Yahoo Sports. As a launching point to the discussion, several Big Ten school administrators are socializing the concept to grant each Power Conference league an equal number of automatic qualifiers in a field of more than 20 teams. However, administrators caution that such a format must garner support of the SEC. According to a college football playoff policy passed last year, the Big Ten and SEC both together must agree on a format for it to be approved. So basically, the Big Ten is now completely changed course and is no longer trying to shut out the Big 12 and the ACC from the college football playoff. Based on what I've heard and based on the reporting that I've seen, all 4 Power 4 conferences would get an equal number of teams, anywhere from 3 to 4 each, with a total field of either 20 to 24 teams. Dellinger goes on. The first step is formalizing a working group of athletic directors from each of the 4 power leagues, a move that was expected to be further explored here in Chicago in meetings of the commissioners of those 4 leagues. If the working group is formalized, various formats are expected to be under consideration, ranging from 16 to 28 to even 32 teams. If no format agreement is reached for the 2026 playoff, leaders are working under a deadline that expires in 2 months. The playoff is likely to remain at 12 teams. Clark told reporters here Wednesday that the CFP Management Committee is comfortable with remaining at 12 teams next year, which is probably why they're not too pressed for rushing for a decision, he said. So what does it all mean? Well, first, this is a huge win for Brett Yormark and the Big 12. Going back to last summer, the SEC and the Big Ten had a death grip on the sport, had just voted to give the Power 2 nearly double the college football playoff revenue, voted to give the Power 2 the authority to make the final decision, as Ross Dellinger pointed out, regarding playoff expansion. The Power 2 had all of the momentum as of last June, when the 4+4+2+2 format was in the terminal stages of approval. It seemed like nothing was going to stop the Southeastern Conference death machine. So what did Yormark do? Well, he refused to sign off on the idea that the Big 12 and ACC by association was worth half of what the Big 10 and the SEC was he publicly denounced the playoff and doubled down on his belief that the Big 12 can and would compete with the Power 2. And everybody thought he was crazy. They thought it was a suicidal move. I heard quotes, they're giving the Big 12 two guaranteed spots, bow down and kiss the ring. The Big 12 never going to get more than one bid. Never mind the fact, by the way, that just a couple years prior, 5 teams from the current Big 12 were representative in the college football playoff, and TCU actually beat the Big 10 champion in the 4-team playoff. But I digress. Yormark had what appeared to be no power at all, and the move seemed very much like a final stand at the Alamo, facing certain death. All you had left to do was fight. And the Big 12 certainly was facing certain death in the college football playoff sense. So what did Yormark do? Well, you do what any small force does when you're facing a juggernaut. He started a guerrilla war. Yormark went in and counterproposed a 5+7 model, 5 conference champion automatic qualifiers and 7 at large, stating that it was better for the sport overall. And while people called him crazy, while people said, there's no way the Big 12 is ever going to get more than 2 teams in, why are you doing this? What he did do was win in the court of public opinion. And everybody from your average Joe on Twitter to Ross Dellingers and CBS writers all over the country started pushing back against the idea of the Big 10 and SEC just absolutely dominating the sport from a legislative standpoint. It got the Big 10 and SEC also to start infighting, where you saw SEC coaches speaking to the media, pushing back against the 4+4+2+2 model in favor of the 5+7, admitting that they didn't like it at all. They didn't want to play the extra games. They didn't want to play they didn't see the sense in the 4+4 model. And SEC coaches in particular saw the 7 at-large spots as an opportunity that the SEC could potentially get more teams in. Now, the Big 10, on the other hand, fully against 5 and 7 unless the SEC went to 9 games. The SEC refused to go to 9 games unless the College Football Playoff Committee agreed to rig the qualifications in their favor. And of course, the way they phrased that was the College Football Playoff Committee had to agree to really, really heavily weight strength of schedule, because of course the SEC's schedule is tougher than everyone else's schedule, despite the fact that they're 500 against the Big 12. But again, I digress. The end result was that the 4+4 playoff model, the model that had all the momentum that was guaranteed to be passed before the end of the next year, completely fell apart. And fast forward to now, the Big 10 has now won the last 2 national championships. The SEC severely underperformed in the inaugural 12-team playoff, where only Texas, a former Big 12 member, by the way, made it out of the opening rounds for the SEC. For over a decade, the SEC has been able to assert dominance over college football by riding the generational success of Nick Saban while using ESPN to control the narrative in the college football playoff. With Saban retired now and the playoff expanded to 12, the SEC has not been able to live up to its own narrative. Something that not only has hurt, but is hurting the perception of the SEC. But also the credibility of ESPN, whose bias towards the SEC was put on full display last week, put on full display in the last college football playoff, as ESPN analysts, including Kirk Herbstreit, hammered the narrative that a 3-4 loss SEC team was more deserving of a college football playoff bid than an 11-1 team anywhere else, such as Indiana or BYU. Just for the SEC, all that, just for the SEC to fall on its face in the ensuing college football playoff games. If the cracks in the SEC weren't clear before, they became painfully obvious this week as Paul Feinbaum, a mouthpiece for Greg Sankey, appeared on TV and verbally threatened the CFP. And remember, the SEC is used to getting what it wants behind the scenes without having to go public. So here's the quote from Paul Feinbaum. We have laid a marker from the SEC at the feet of the CFP, and they better deliver. And I'm not making threats because I don't have any more control over it than anybody else, but I know some people that do. And if they screw this up, they will be paying for it. And I don't know how or will, but they should, because this is unequivocal what the SEC has laid down tonight. Of course, the marker was that you better include more SEC teams in the playoff, or else the SEC will break away and form its own league. The problem with that is the general public, as well as the college football analysts from outside of ESPN, have begun to question whether or not the SEC could even carry itself anymore without the rest of the league. The SEC has been lying for so long that they're beginning to believe their own lies, which by far the worst thing you can do when you're running a con, because in order to control the narrative, you need to actually understand reality. And while Greg Sankey for the last 10 years is pushing the SEC as a league above everyone else narrative, and that a 9-3 SEC team is better than an 11-1 Big 12 team, behind closed doors, Greg Sankey is fully aware that the SEC is only marginally better than everyone else, fully aware that the Big 10 is starting to surpass, and that the Big 12 is not dead without Texas and OU. And by having a realistic understanding of reality, he was able to tailor the narrative accordingly. Problem is now the SEC is starting to buy their own BS, and so the narratives aren't based in reality anymore. That's why the SEC was able to push the narrative that TCU wasn't worthy of a CFP bid, despite the fact that the Frogs beat a Big Ten champion Michigan to get to the national championship game, because when you understand reality, you can manipulate reality. But when you start to believe your own BS, your premises don't make sense. And when your premises don't make sense, not only does the general public not believe you anymore, but your TV partners, conference commissioners, nobody buys it anymore. So when we see Feinbaum go make a public threat to the college football playoff to add more SEC teams, or else, it means the SEC is floundering behind closed doors and are now trying to put public pressure on the CFP to get what they want. They're not used to getting their way without a fight, and they don't know how to handle this kind of pushback. And as I've been saying for years, Icarus is flying closer and closer to the sun, and the wings are starting to melt. Moving on now, football has been played. Let's go back and take a look at where the Big 12 stands. Here are the first midseason Big 12 power rankings.
She's God, Captain. If I push it any harder, the whole thing will blow.
It's Division I football. It's the Big 12. It ain't murals.
All right, let's dive in. For number 16, I have Oklahoma State. Just fired longtime head coach Mike Gundy after a 1-3 start. Season is really over before it even begins, and I feel bad for the Cowboys. They've been good for a long time, and sometimes you just know when a run is over, and this run is over. It might be a while before the Cowboys get back on track. Number 15, Colorado. May improve as the season progresses, but they're just not a good team this year. They really were robbed of an offseason with all the stuff going on with Dion over the summer. And that they might get better as the season goes, but they're not going to be a Big 12 contender. Number 14, West Virginia. This team, I will say, plays really hard for Rich Rodriguez, but they have way too many critical injuries, and they may not win another game this year. Number 13, UCF. Just lost to a bad Kansas State team last week. I would say they overperformed expectations so far. I think we thought they were going to be on the same level as West Virginia, maybe going 0-9 in conference play. They still might not finish 6-6. They still may go 4-8 or 5-7, but they're a little bit better than we thought they would be. Number 12, Arizona started the season strong, but got blown out by Iowa State last week. Just didn't look good at all when they had to face real competition. Number 11, Kansas State. Very disappointing start for the Wildcats. Got a win over UCF last week and may finish above 500 this year, but certainly not the season that the Wildcats thought they were going to get. Number 10, Baylor. was expected to be a dark horse Big 12 contender. It might still be, but so far the Bears have been pretty mediocre. Number 9, Houston. The offense has improved. The defense took a step back without Shillwood. They just look slower, not as motivated. As I said earlier in the episode, I'm expecting 8-4 from Houston, but they're going to be kind of in the middle of the road within the Big 12. Number 8, Kansas. Lost to Cincinnati last week. I think they're incredibly overrated, but they're still finishing in the top half of the Big 12. Number 7, Cincinnati. Had a win over Kansas, which was surprising. They look better than expected. We'll see if Satterfield will make it past this year. I predicted at the beginning of the season that he would be fired either within the year or by the end of the year, and they're making a case to give him another year. Number 6, TCU, a dark horse contender for the Big 12. They just lost a close one to Arizona State last week, but they're still a very good team. Number 5, BYU. Quietly one of the best teams in the Big 12, currently undefeated. They struggled a bit against Colorado last week, but still came out on top. Number 4, Arizona State. Stumbled out of the gate, had a huge walk-off win against Baylor last week, though. They are improving week to week. They still need an answer at running back to replace Cam Scadaboo, at least in terms of some production. Number 3, Utah, absolutely one of the best defenses in the Big 12. Devin Dampier, by the way, had a great game against West Virginia last week. My favorite to go to Arlington this year, a Big 12 title contender. Number 2, Iowa State, currently number 1 in the Big 12 standings. They have played a tough schedule so far and remain undefeated. The team to beat in the Big 12. And of course, number 1, the Texas Tech Red Raiders, undefeated, ranked number 11 in the AP poll. One of the best defenses, not just in the Big 12, but in the whole country. And I don't think we've seen the best of Baron Morton yet. I think we've only got improvement coming to the Red Raiders on the offensive side of the ball. Now, one last thing before we get out of here. Texas Tech officially released the complete basketball schedule. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, of course, we in a previous episode, we took a look at the non-conference schedule. So we'll skip ahead over to the to Big 12 play, which starts with Oklahoma State on January 3rd in the United Supermarkets Arena. January 6th, they get Houston on the road. January 10th, they go at Colorado. January 14th, back home against Utah in the United Supermarkets Arena. January 17th against BYU at home. January 20th, they go on the road to the Foster Pavilion to play the Baylor Bears. And then back home on January 24th to face the Houston Cougars. You get Houston twice in the month of January. After that, on the road to Financial Arena to face UCF on January 31st. Kansas at home, United Supermarkets Arena on February 2nd, Monday. That appears to be a ESPN Big Monday tip-off. February 8th, West Virginia on the road at the West Virginia Coliseum. February 11th, you get Colorado again, this time at home in the United Supermarkets Arena. February 14th, on the road against Arizona. That'll be a big one on Saturday. February 17th, Arizona State, also on the road. Texas Tech taking a road trip through the desert there. Kansas State, February 23rd at the United Supermarkets Arena. You get Cincinnati again back home on February 24th. Iowa State at the Hilton Coliseum, February 28th. And then on March 3rd, TCU at home and BYU on March 7th at the Marriott Center to close the season. Definitely a tough schedule, but every schedule is a tough schedule in the Big 12. I will say you're incredibly front-loaded with both Houston games being played in January in the first half of the season. You only have to get Kansas once, and you get them at home. The road game to close the season against BYU is going to be a tough one as well. And of course, you got to go to Iowa State to the Hilton Coliseum to face the Cyclones there. But otherwise, Kansas State shouldn't be too much of an issue. They were an absolute mess last year. Arizona is a tough team, but Arizona State, not too bad. Colorado, not too bad. West Virginia, not too bad. If you make it through this first half of the season, it's all just downhill from there. The Red Raiders could easily snowball their way into a top 4, top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. Some quick updates before we get out of here. I am going to be returning to one show a week. Starting next week, we'll have a new podcast every Tuesday, along with the live post-game show at the conclusion of each game. And that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps support me, helps support the algorithm. I will be back live on X at the conclusion of the game on Saturday. For Flatland Sports, I am Christopher Johnson. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining me tonight. And Recom Tech.